Be pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning to you. If you're tuned in from every other part of the world, download our app, Smooth 981 FM, on the Google Play Store. If you're using an Android phone, if you're using an iPhone, go to the Apple App Store. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Once you type that in, you can download and take us with you wherever you go. Our conversation will be around these 8 stories: hate speech bill sponsors retracting his words, Kogi election violence, and life lost. Women leader. Zonal intervention projects being looked into some more, especially with the directive by the president. Federal government to ban single-use plastics in 2024. LASG government sealing 20 facilities due to noise pollution. Buhari orders minister to complete Ajakuta steel and stakes locking horns with the federal government over road project refund, and Senate in fresh bid to abrogate State Council joint account. All these stories, if time permits us, we'll go through it. But to join the conversation, please send a message on WhatsApp 0809 I have Tunde Okufe with me. That's Big Coats. Good morning.
Morning, Valentine.
Good morning to you. And of course, Re-Ink Nigeria. That's Wade Ahimia. Good morning, Wade.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Tunde. Good morning, Lagos.
And welcome to every one of you. Join us on YouTube. We're streaming live. And WhatsApp, again, that number 0809 Today, let's start with this first one from Premium Times. Hate speech bill sponsor. He said he wants the death penalty reviewed. He said that this was majorly influenced by listening to Nigerians and due to the respect he has for Nigeria, has to apply to the Nigerian context. All this while, okay, so we have a fair idea of what goes into putting bills together. There's a lot of thinking that's expected to be put into it, and then before it's written down and somebody's supposed to review, and then it's presented on the floor of the House. A bill that has passed second reading. Is this?
Wow.
What is your thoughts?
Yeah, wow. And he says that and he's coming around to this based on feedback. So if the people didn't protest, this is well and good in his view, right? Just a few questions. Do we have capital punishment or the death penalty for armed robbery in this country?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
If their life is lost.
I feel like it's lost.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
but
is.
not in so is it for the act of armed robbery or the act of murder during?
For when life is lost.
Do we have capital punishment for losers of the treasury?
No.
No.
So if you're aware of those things, the fact that you can perform an armed robbery and not face the death penalty, have the death penalty for people who loot our commonwealth, I don't see how it's permissible to even consider death penalty for what you describe as hate speech. We need to be very careful, and people tend to forget that. I mean, even the sponsor of this bill. I mean, there's an adage: the cane that was used. Sorry. I mean, I hope I don't offend any sounds sexist, but the cane that was used to flog the first wife is the same one that we used to flog the second. Right? It's ridiculous. Of all the things that we can be focusing on now, really, of all the issues plaguing the nation, is this what is of paramount interest? And look at the speed at which it is scaling through readings. So many other things have been pushed aside. It's clear the political class own this country, and not the people, not the masses. Then again, there's a part of the report where he cites the WHO, and he says that Nigeria is the 7th largest country in the world, yes, has Africa's highest rate of depression and ranks 5th in the world's frequency of suicide rates. And I'm like, oh really, due to hate speech, right? Not endemic poverty and a lack of opportunities. It's hate speech. Instead of focusing on the things that will help drive up and improve our ranking or on this index, he chooses to focus on hate speech. And then it doesn't end there, because his proposal is that they create a commission for this. When we're already talking about large government and talking about the expense and cost of government, they'll create another commission for government largesse, with all the certain allowances, with vehicles, with everything, more jobs for their boys. It's
So this hate speech bill, by the way, is what a lot of people know as the social media bill, aka social media bill. At the event, the Afrima event on Saturday, were you there? You saw how Lai Mohammed was there, Minister of for Information. He was there giving a speech and talking about how the federal government released certain funds for the creative industry and how government is intending to put in more funds to that, and people were booing him and shouting, "Say no to hate speech." They were not having it. But right now, talking about this story, it's interesting to know that even Sahara Reporters has this report that this publication I just pulled up from yesterday, saying the Nigerian senator plagiarized internet bill from Singapore's parliament, that it was word for word, comma for comma, according to even Nee's comments on WhatsApp. It was like they lifted the Singaporean version
Valentine.
and copy and pasted it.
Valentine, does that surprise us? Is that not our country?
And how it passed second reading. So a lot of things boggle my mind.
Is that not our country?
Because nobody really wants to put in the work.
Nobody puts in the work. There's very little quality. There's very little quality in the system and in our governance especially. So I mean, it's no surprise they told someone to go and draft a bill. The guy probably went online, found something, pulled it out, and without even changing any commas.
English translation, probably.
And just threw it in.
Without even considering
Emeka, thank you very much for the
dynamics
clarity
of the country.
Emeka from Ikeja says armed robbery is punishable by death in Nigeria, whether it leads to death or not. Olu from Alaka says, Ibukun from Ijora, it says on the amendment to the Hate Speech Act, my opinion is that provision was put in there just so that there's something to take out so they can claim that they listen to the people. If they are really listening to the people, the bill would not have been thought of in the first place. We have enough civil and criminal laws to cover hate speech. Even in defamation acts or actions in court, normal abuse is not defamation. Thank you, Buku. Let's move on to our next story. Zonal intervention projects in Nigeria's budgets need a total overhaul to avoid corruption is some of the rhetoric that echoed from a summit that was attended over the weekend. Premium Times reports this story as laying claim to the fact that there's need to adjust and to provide proper oversight and proper integrity in the affairs in disbursing these funds. Zonal interventions projects, we know, is another word for the constituency project funding that states governors receive regularly. But your thoughts on this story, Wade?
This is really a statement of facts. Like we've seen over the years. According to this report, over 1 trillion naira has been budgeted for constituency projects for the last 10 years, and over 2 trillion was spent since 2000. And many of these constituencies haven't seen anything.
They've seen something, but they
haven't seen anything tangible that matches the amount of monies that we're talking about. 3 trillion here that has been, or about 2 trillion that has been spent in the last 19 years. I think the process is completely flawed. First, the members of the National Assembly who proposed this constituency project, how do they come about them? What's the process for it? Do they work with the constituencies and the local governments to ensure that these things have been properly put in place? For me, I think a lot of these things should. I'm not against the constituency project, but the process itself should change. It should get more involved, the local governments more involved, so that they're the ones who know what happens within those constituencies. They're the ones who manage the people within the different constituencies. That's one part. The National Assembly members should provide proper oversight. They shouldn't be responsible for selecting the contractors, or they should put a process in place that the local government run it, and you provide these funds as these projects are being worked upon. Another thing that they said, which for me is the fact of the matter, is constituency projects should be projects that you can see, tangible projects, not what's it called, social projects that we really don't know whether the constituencies are receiving these funds or not. And quite a number of recommendations were made. One of the strong recommendations was government should not accept new projects until the ones that are already been budgeted for have been completed.
So when you think about the 800 plus buses that was purchased for Lagos Street Transport, does that fall under this? We see a lot of projects being discontinued before because a new administration has come in, and that leads to a lot of redundancy. But the example I gave, do you think it might fall into this if it's accepted?
Yes, it will be. Why? Because you're trying to ease the transportation. It's not that you're just giving the monies or handing out the monies and saying
No,
that.
that's just example. Yeah. So
And
not
so
necessarily
it
about
will
the sector.
fit. It will fit into it. So whatever sector it is, let's see those things and let's see how they are improving the daily lives of the people in the country.
Yeah, how about this other aspect? Because a lot of recommendations were made as an offshoot from this seminar, the
Yeah.
2-day seminar. Unutilized zonal intervention project releases should be mopped up to the Treasury at the end of the financial year. And then when I say this, I think of the TSA, the Treasury Single Account. So that's in itself. Over time, we know that it's lack of. I wouldn't say accountability. Accountability is
Accountability,
one of
yeah.
them, of course. It's put into question, but how do you think that the state government or the state governors would allow this to happen for the funds that are left over to be sent back to the federal government?
I think the proper process for me should be based on project milestones and payments on project milestones. So the ministries that are involved, the local government manage those things. And at the end of the year, like you said, if there is monies left that the projects have not been completed, you can bring them back and then you put them back into the projects the next year on the continuum.
Interesting. Thank you, Wadi. Reactions about the hate speech bill. Emeka from Aja says, APC government, let's not make this partisan, please. I would refuse to read any message that, tends towards that. Henry Dixon says, constituency project is nothing but an opportunity for them to eat money. I live in Ikorodu North, and for 8 years, the only constituency project that was done was a borehole. Interesting. Olatunji says, from Ajegunle, kindly help clarify this. Finance bill hearing happening today at the House of Representatives. What impact will it make since the upper legislative chambers have already passed the finance bill? Can the president sign the bill without the House of Representatives present or consent? I do not think so, because there's a process that goes into this, and it needs to reach its end before the president gives assent. But I guess in special cases, the president could give an executive order.
Yeah.
All right, Tunde, let's look at the story from Premium Times. Kogi election violence. Buhari orders investigation into the PDP woman leader's murder. The story reports that the People's Democratic woman leader in Kogi State was murdered 2 days after the violence reading Kogi election happened 2 weekends ago. But looking at this story, we see that the counts on people who lost their lives increased to about 10. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Perhaps we should begin by saying, our thoughts go out to the family of Salome Abu, the PDP chieftain, women's chieftain, who was 60 years old. This was an arson attack because her house was set on fire while she was in it, and it's believed to be a reprisal attack because of the violence that's happened. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, it's saddening because it's not often. The solutions are not easy. We need to change. There's a lot we need to change. We need to change our attitudes towards elections being do or die matters of life and death. But I keep on saying it's because of the huge reward that is present. I mean, people don't go into public office really expecting to serve, but to line their pockets, and it's so easy for them to do so. So that's why they take it as a matter of life and death. To be honest, the number of casualties has risen to 10. We all know how poorly we even keep track and record of people. So it's possible that it may be much higher. It's worrying. If we were to count the number of casualties from our elections, I'm sure some wars in the West are prosecuted with less casualties or operations, and not to mind something that's meant to be a peaceful and civic exercise is carried out as though it's war. It's sad, and people lose their lives. The elections in Kogi has been, there's no doubt about it, has been marred by violence and huge irregularities. That much is clear. There's a rerun that's been earmarked, and even observers, certain observers, Yaga and the Situation Room called for its outright cancellation because of the amount of violence. Anyway, this comes from the president because his condolences goes out to, or at least his media person goes out to the family of Mrs. Abu, but he doesn't accept or accede to the fact that there was huge violence recorded in the Kogi elections.
What I would have liked to see was for all the parties involved, all these key stakeholders to be called together and direct questions be asked. You know these people, you work with them, you see them every day, so you can identify at least a few individuals that were involved in this
Valentine,
violence.
you're right, but you see, that's they've done in this case. They may not have done that, but we've tried these things before, even before elections. We get people, they come together, we get people to sign
Sign a
and
piece of
agree, sign a piece of code, agree that look, we will, do this free and fair without violence. There's literally no people. It's
Lack
and
of
it's,
consequences.
yeah, lack of consequences, and the fact that we don't even prosecute or fight our elections. We don't execute our elections based on um, manifestos or any clear agenda and let your idea win out. If your idea doesn't win out this time, you modify it and hopefully it's something that resonates with the people. That's not how we do it. You just want to take people out even before the day. It's unfortunate, and it's the pawns that suffer.
Sadly. We'll get back to the story from the Vanguard. Lagos State government seals 20 facilities warns against attack on officials. The general manager of LASEPA being the Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Dr. Adedolapo Fashare, he said that the agency clamped down on more than 20 facilities over various environmental related issues in its determination to curb the menace of environmental nuisances and further restore sanity and orderliness across the state. Succinctly meaning that some of the cases were noise pollution related. What are your thoughts on this entire coverage?
I think this is a welcome development. Aside from closing down a lot of those facilities, I think another thing that should really go in is how do these facilities even get the permissions to use some of these places? Because you sleep and then the next morning you wake up, you find out that there's a nightclub right next to you, the building right next to you. So who gives them these permits?
People.
And, yeah, I know.
Officials.
Yeah, so I know. So
yes, but what I'm trying to point out is yes, you can get approvals. They can come and provide oversight to verify that these are the things, the services you're providing or you're going to
Yes.
give. But in cases of churches, for instance,
Yes.
you can't tell from the get-go, from the point of registration, that they're going to be blaring their speakers outside.
What about having places
where they can actually have these things done? And that's
unplanned city
that's the
development?
issue. What's the process? Is LASEPA involved in this process to ensure that when you say you want to, for instance, you buy a property and you say you want to turn it into a church, the questions that you should ask: what are the environmental issues that are going to come about it?
Does
it fit into the plan of the area? Because like I said, you wake up the next morning and you find out that you didn't sleep all night because yesterday and things happen. But it's a welcome development and they should go on with it. The other thing about it for me is that even the communities themselves should start working together with each other and LASEPA to ensure that some of these things can be managed more efficiently by reporting some of these things, by also even the leaders within the communities should start talking about these things. Well, it brings, for instance, churches, like you said, are they going to be blaring their speakers? Noise reduction. So you need to know what level of noise you can make within that area. And if you are not doing that, then you should be punished for it.
It's the talk that got us here.
Yeah.
And we still are talking about this. We've been talking about it for years.
Yeah, and there is action now being done.
Yes.
And let's support. Yes, so let's support these things.
I say this thing, I understand, and it makes perfect sense to me. But I say the thing because we know of denominations that have at least a branch in every street.
And I agree.
And it's part of their mission statement to ensure that they have as much churches as possible.
And I agree. And it doesn't mean that you should constitute a nuisance within the area. And that's my point. So if you're going to blare your music, then there must be a level that is acceptable to that place.
Thank you, Wadi. Next story from The Guardian. Today, federal government to ban single-use plastic materials in 2024. So they're following the plan. According to them, they've actually it reads like an idea. They're thinking about any concrete efforts being made. Is there any action towards this?
So I see you stumbled on the title, and I can tell why. It's part of the same national issue that we have with the copy and paste. There's a difference between banned single use of plastic and banning
Plastic entirely.
single-use plastic.
Mhm.
So the off in the middle of use and plastic changes it. It's not single use of plastic, because this may read that we're saying we should ban plastic. We're saying ban single-use plastic. We're not saying ban plastic. We have plastic chairs. We have all sorts of other plastic containers
So let's
that can be reused.
let's assume is the error was in the reporting, because I corrected it myself as single use plastic, because that in itself has its own unique meaning, saying
yes,
that
absolutely.
Plastic should be made to be recyclable.
Exactly, or you make products with plastic that have longevity that can be used for
a long
more
period.
than one or at least multiple times. Single-use plastic is water bottles, for instance. You use it; they're not made to be reused. You're meant to throw them away, and a bunch of other plastics for that we use in eateries and a bunch of other things. You may argue that is potentially reused, but they're meant to also be discarded. Plastic forks, straws, so many things. Now the problem is that single-use plastic ends up typically in the wrong places. It ends up filling landmines, and that's even when it's even sort of herded properly. Usually, you find it washed up, along the shoreline, right in the water. Usually only, and we don't dispose of our waste well enough anyway. So why don't we move it higher up the line, and change some of the items that end up in the environment and harms the environment. And one of them, clearly one of the biggest ones, is use of single-use plastic. Nylon bags is another. Most of the world has made this change, and there's suitable alternatives now. So it's a good idea. We need to think about the planet. I mean, really, and we all need to chip in. We should not just look at these things as initiatives from the West. Even if you look at other African countries, I mean, across, I think Ghana has banned plastic bags as well. Kenya has banned it. I know Kenya has. Was Kenya like him? I'm not sure about Ghana. But African countries are taking the initiative, and we should as well not be left behind in this. It needs to change. Even the US used to export single-use plastic to China. Then earlier this year, China stopped. Refused to stop collecting it, because they'll collect it and process it. Now the US too is beginning to, or specific states are beginning to change and think about their policies around it. So this is good.
Thank you, Sunday. We'll look at more stories. In the meantime, let's go to your messages. Henry Dixon says Lagos State investigating without doing the right thing will not yield any results. He says the only lasting solution to putting an end to the loss of life and property during election and huge spending to put an election together is by introducing the electronic voting system. And I'd say the Senate already contemplating that. Lagos State government, he added, should come down to Odogunya Ikorodu Industrial Estate and see the unbearable air pollution from the factories in the area. I pity the adults and children residing in that area. Thank you, Henry, for bringing that to our attention. Sharon said, I'll say it for you if you cannot. I called the church's name. Sorry, we don't call brand names here, that's why. He called the church's name, a denomination, by the way. He said they have a branch on every street, and they make the entire vicinity unbearable when they blare their music and all over the PA system. Lagos State needs to clamp down on them. Austin here says, good morning, crew. Hate speech bill. The sponsor of the bill knew it won't work, but just wanted to be popular.
I'm surprised though. When it gets passed now, you'll be saying you wanted to be popular.
Exactly. Ubomachinoze says the noise pollution is really getting out of hand. For example, I live in an estate in a canal, but suddenly by a canal, but suddenly a very quiet estate. I woke up yesterday to discover that 2 new churches are now on my street, that includes the chosen church that was there before. I was thinking of relocating. Okay, all right. Thank you. Dozier says, what a pleasure. Thank you, Dozier. Thank you so much. Levi says, unfortunately, the peace accord focuses more on accepting his election results and insisting on violence-free elections. You're right. It still comes down to consequences, though. Olu says, on the amendment of the hate speech bill or act, my opinion is that the provision was put in there just so that there's something to take out. Thank you. I think we saw this earlier. Kwemi Praise says, churches and mosques should be soundproofed. And yes, modern churches are soundproofed, and I can attest to that. V from Lekki says, funny thing is, the branches of these same churches abroad conduct their services very quietly.
And they're in specific locations, mind you.
That's right.
Not in apartment blocks and estates.
High residential areas, or commercial zones. Anyway, so let's move on to this next story, Wadi. This is about states locking horns with federal government over road project refund. A Punch newspaper reports this story, saying the indications that the federal government and states are heading for a fresh battle over the delay in refunding the money spent by the state governments on federal roads. We know that the Minister of Works, Babatunde Fashola, had on the 24th of September said that the President, Muhammadu Buhari, had directed the state governments to stop rehabilitating federal roads. Before they had said that there was going to be a plan to refund the monies that if states invested in fixing these roads. But we know that the roads are bad, horrible shape. Why is this happening now, and where does this lead us?
And let me just add what you said. Do you want the states to lose economic value because the federal roads are bad, and that's why they need to put some monies into it? The report says that the states have actually asked for about 1 trillion naira, and so far only 44 billion had been certified and paid. Now the question here is, what? There are three questions here. What's the process for this? If the federal government cannot do these things on time, how do you ensure that if the states are doing them, they're working in collaboration with the federal ministry, for instance, the state ministry and the federal ministry, who supervises and oversees or monitors these processes, so that you are sure that what you say the amount is what the amount should be, and if there are changes and these things can be done. Another thing is, how, like I said, how do you ensure that they work together? Because the states don't just wake up and say we're building the roads. Many a times they communicate to the federal government and say, we need to rehabilitate this thing, and they say, okay, go ahead and rehabilitate it, and that's the end. So when I bring a bill, you say you're not paying. What's the monitoring process? So once you are able to put these three things together, it is easier for you to come and say, oh, this 2 kilometer road, the state says it's 10 million. The state says it's 10 million. However, the federal government would oversee it and say, oh no, we can do it for 5 million or 6 million. And these things need to be done, not just make a blanket statement and say, stop working on federal roads. If the federal road is the only road that brings you into my state, how do I create economic value when I don't have? And this, for me, some of the reports says that, for instance, Cross River State is being owned 25 billion, Sokoto 16.8 billion. These are huge sums, and these are monies that can go into development of the states on their own. And I think they should have a rethink about how they go about fixing federal roads.
Thank you very much. Tunji says, is the federal government still arguing about refunds to states for projects? They just refunded Kogi State, or was it for elections? Dami says, why do you need 5 years to complete an action on plastic? Plastic waste is an environmental hazard. We should start taking action from 2020. If it's the borders now, they know they will close it down with immediate effect. Femi, thank you so very much for your message. It says, to the listener who's surprised that 2 new churches are now on the streets, you should be happy that his miracle is now closer. Very interesting, thank you. The next story from New Telegraph reads as headline, Buhari orders minister to complete Ajaokuta steel. Yeah. Why that side?
If only everything could be executed purely on presidential declarations,
yes,
then wouldn't we be a fantastic and wonderful nation?
It would be so nice.
It would be sweet.
It would be better than Dubai tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm telling you. If you could just stand on the podium and say this and this and that, get it done. And the pronouncement is, even contains our one of our favorites. The minister, President Muhammad, has given the minister his marching orders. We never missed that out. So the minister has been given his marching orders. The president has made this declaration, and therefore, Ajaokuta Stealing Company will finally come to light. Something that has plagued
his words, not mine.
That has plagued us has never come to light. Ajaokuta is one of the most opaque projects in the history of the nation, and it's so difficult to unravel. And let's call it spade a spade. It's a combination of ineptitude, but beyond ineptitude, Nigerians are not inept, really, to be honest. It's corruption, right? It's been a huge conduit for stealing, I was going to say government funds, but the nation's funds. And that's why the project hasn't seen the light of the day. And because it's so opaque, we can't even tell whether it is even worth pursuing in the current state. There have been reports that have come out that said the technology and the facilities put in place, because this was something that was supposed to be built for us by the Soviets since the early 70s, right? The steel industry has moved ahead, right? I mean, even if this were to come, even if they're to complete it, would it be fit for purpose? But we can't tell because there's very little information. And steel is so important to any nation to build the infrastructure of any nation. Any country, any world power, or anyone that has achieved any level of development has, produces their own steel. Look at China. China won't have been able to build all those the massive cities that they have today if they don't produce steel, and they're one of the leading producers today. The US wouldn't be what it is today as well, because you need to get that steel from somewhere, and you'll be getting at huge cost. If you produce your own steel, then things become a lot cheaper. The production of and construction of so many things that we need will become a lot more affordable. So this is important, but yet and still, we play with it. Two things that I'll say that other things that stand out to me. So the minister was speaking through his two things around whether we can achieve this. One, the minister was speaking through his special advisor, which is a habit of all our officials, right? It would have been better if he was speaking directly so we can hold him accountable. And then secondly, most of the story, he pivots away from Ajaokuta and talks about the rest of his portfolio, which is minerals, which is indicative. Those two things are indicative as to whether or not this declaration is.
So it doesn't evoke any confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Victor Silva says the "Shut Up Nigeria" bill, is calling it in quotes. The hate speech bill is another joke. Henry Dixon says he's tired of hearing about this Ajaokuta steel revamping spending by every administration. The best solution is to privatize it. Government doing business is complete waste of resources. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who's joined this conversation this morning. And thank you very much. Tunde Okufi at Big Clothes. Thank you, Wade. He's at Ring, Nigeria. And join us next as we talk sports. Enter the locker room. That's at 8:15. This is Smith Breakfast.
The headlines.